In developing in photography, I've been very much self-taught. I mostly just went to the school of YouTube, you could say. I didn't attend any formal training or anything like that. It's been a lot of trial and error, a lot of research and testing and kind of figuring out where things go on my own. I am Wes Perry. I'm originally from South Shore, Nova Scotia, kind of the end of the earth. But I've been in Moncton area for about 20 years now, which seems kind of crazy that it's been that long. I am a photographer, a YouTuber, and a musician, although people might not know of either side of that, but I keep pretty busy these days doing all those things. Growing up, again, I was from a really small town, very rural area, and so it's kind of the sort of thing that you see in classic movies where we would just wander around all day, leave the house, play in the woods from the sun up to sundown, and just playing with sticks and rocks, playing by the ocean, exploring the world. Kind of feels a lot different from how kids grow up these days, but I also feel like I sound very old when I say something like that. I started doing photography probably, depends on when you count as a job versus as a hobby. And honestly, for me, it hasn't been that long. Like, I don't have one of those stories where my entire life I've been doing photography, even as a child and all that. It's not quite so dramatic as that. I started doing photography probably 6 or 7 years ago when I was working with a theater group with Hub City Theater. And it's really hard to get people to do photography for a not-for-profit theater group, and we had no money to really give anyone, and nothing but promotional consideration at best, and even then it wasn't that much. And so I thought, hey, how hard could it be? I might as well do it. And turns out it can be pretty hard. And so one thing really led to another, and it snowballs from there. As anyone who's in photography knows, photography is really a snowball thing. You start with one thing and one camera, one lens, and it really rolls very quickly. And so I started just by trying to do photography for the theater group, and next thing you know, I was shooting families and weddings and things like that. And I say next thing you know, and it seems like a cliche thing, but it really didn't take that long before things really started picking up from there. And here I am. My career, it kind of just, it sounds, I don't know, maybe conceited to say this, but my career just kind of developed itself. I just more or less went where the winds took me, where photography took me, where people offered me jobs. It largely went into weddings, and that's where a lot of people start with photography. Not because it's necessarily the easy thing to do, which it definitely isn't. If you think it is, then you have the wrong idea. But it's where there is a lot of work, and it's where you can make enough money and spend enough time to really build your career and your experience. So my main camera body would be the Sony A9. Go-to lens would be the 85 1.4 G Master. And when I'm going for a shoot, I usually have this on one hip, and on the other hip I have an A7 III with the 16 to 35 2.8 zoom. I started early on with the Sony mirrorless system, and to begin with it was not that great. And now they've come to be known as kind of the leaders in the market as it is. And by nature, I'm a very technological person, and some people's complaint about Sony systems is that it's very techy, very technological. And while that may or may not be true, I do enjoy that about it. There's a lot of small things, a lot of customizability. You can change everything about the camera you want, and more specifically the lens itself. This is my favorite lens because not only is it a very sharp, very detailed lens, but it also has almost a classic look to it. It bridges the gap between having great character and also great modern lens design. And so I really like that combo of very advanced autofocus features and the ability to have kind of a classic look with great sharpness and reproduction. Was that too technical? My biggest influences for photography would probably be, and they are wedding photographers, but I don't necessarily want that to mean that it's all about wedding photography, because I see these people as kind of bridging the gap and doing very creative things. It would be Eamon Kuliev. He is a wedding photographer in New York, Manhattan, and Sam Hurd, which people probably know who Sam Hurd is, probably not so much Eamon Kuliev. they're both very creative photographers, although in very different ways. Sam is big on creative compositions that pretty much exclusively feature the subjects and kind of blur out and subtract everything else, whereas Eamon Kuliev, he likes to embrace the chaos, embrace the entire situation of the image, and I really enjoy the emotion and the compositions and things like that. I find them both very inspiring. I can't really point to any single biggest project. It's especially as a wedding photographer, because each wedding is such a big undertaking every single time. It's hard to point to any one thing, but honestly, the biggest project as a photographer is to get to where you are, because every day, every month is about development, about growing, and I feel like as a photographer, if you don't find yourself somewhere new every year, you're not really tapping what you should be tapping. And so for me, the biggest project is just finding myself where I am right now, where my style has evolved to. In building something, honestly, the most work that's gone into something is like building my YouTube channel, building my business, while still working other jobs, while still trying to like support a family, keep things moving. I kind of envy people who got into this at a younger age when they didn't have quite so much to take care of, quite so many bills to pay. For me, I was already established, already had a mortgage and things like that, and so it's really hard to transition, and eventually I made it. I quit the day job, and it's a huge accomplishment. It's a lot of work, it's a big risk, and we'll be talking more about that in a later question, so I don't want to say too much more. I'm going to have a similarly evasive answer to this question, because I find that I can't adequately appreciate or adequately enjoy any particular genre of photography without also shooting other things. If I only shot weddings, if I only shot commercial work, I feel like number one, my work would stagnate, and number two, I would get bored. And so I would find it impossible to point to any one thing, because without all the others, I wouldn't be able to be where I am with all the others. And so for me, photography is a very holistic thing in being able to take pieces from various things, to take commercial work and put it in weddings, to take the ideal and the spontaneity of weddings and put it back into other things. And so I can't just say one is the favorite, because they all are pieces of the puzzle that you have to put together to create the end game, to create your full style and expression. Personally, and I think that most photographers would say this, I despise shot lists. Although I might despise them for my own reasons. It's not just about the monotony of going through shots that are someone else's, it's that I find that one generally ends up with worse pictures when following a detailed shot list. For me, taking pictures, especially on a wedding day, which is what shot lists generally point toward, because those shot lists can be very long. For me, taking pictures on a wedding day is about embracing the moment, about exploring the environment, about working with what you are given on the spot. And I don't want that to sound like a cop-out, because it's about trying to reproduce the experience of the moment. And when you can do that, when you can use the environment that you're in, the compositions that you can find, you create an end product that is much more unique, much more expressive, and much more memorable than just going through a list of shots. Now, obviously, there are going to be a lot of the certain type of shots, a lot of safety shots, a lot of the same things that you're going for, but they all come out at the end of the day no matter what, because you're capturing everything that's a part of the day. So all those shots that you're looking for, they are simply a part of the day, and they will be captured. 5 years though, my end goal is actually to have a lot more of my income and revenue coming from my YouTube channel, and be taking a lot less photography gigs. Now, I don't want to be taking no gigs. I want to be charging more and just taking less, because the last few years have been very hectic in trying to grow the business, make enough money to support my family. And when you're shooting 1, 2, 3 weddings every weekend all summer, your life becomes just a roller coaster. You don't remember things. You don't really get to appreciate the work that you're doing. And so for me, I'd like the flexibility of having most of my income coming from YouTube, which will allow me to really focus on my photography in a much better way. And that will allow life to be more flexible, less exhausting, and more satisfying probably. Now, 5 years from now at this point seems like a pipe dream, but who knows, anything can happen. As I said, building the business while working the day jobs was a lot of work, and so most of what you might call as a hobby has kind of dropped by the wayside. Pretty much everything I do these days is a part of some sort of a job, some sort of employment. But it's funny to say that because most of what I do now, I do enjoy. And so I've taken all the things that I've enjoyed and monetized them. Now you have to be careful when you do that because that can make those things less enjoyable. It can make them a chore, which does happen from time to time. You got to pull back and balance your life. I used to do theater and acting, but now that I'm doing weddings, that eats up all my weekends in the summer, so I can't do that anymore, unfortunately. I'm a musician, but I do that as a job at Sunnybray Baptist Church. So again, I don't know if you still call it a hobby when it's a part of my job. And photography, one might call it a hobby. Occasionally I get to just take pictures for fun. And that's one of the things that I like about doing YouTube is I get to choose what photo shoots I do, choose who I work with, and that's fun. But again, it's hard to call it a hobby when it's a part of my income. Unfortunately, and it's kind of become the cliche thing to have the grind, to have that mentality to kind of always push forward and take all those hobbies and monetize them. But so far, they're still kind of hobbies, but they're also jobs, so it's hard to answer that question. That could take a few different directions. On the one side, I know a lot of people from the various aspects of my life who don't necessarily know about the other aspects. Like the people who know me from YouTube might not know that I'm a professional musician. The people who know me as a wedding photographer might not know that I'm on YouTube. Like I have all these different facets of my life that I'm always working and I always enjoy, that people don't necessarily know that I'm always busy with. And I'm also a technologist. I spent 7.5 years as a commercial fire alarm technician. I still go back to work for them from time to time when they need help because I have a lot of experience there and did a lot of jobs there. And so I have a BA and I also have my electrical engineering degree. But then on the other side of that, personality-wise, because I'm often on camera, I'm often in front of people, I'm often working with a lot of people, people may or may not realize that I'm actually a huge introvert, and I feel like the people watching this, it's helpful to know that you can still do these public-facing things and be that person who is very strongly introverted. And believe you me, I am. And sometimes it's easier to just talk to a lens than to talk to people, but in intense social situations, I generally have a job to do, which makes the job of being an introvert not as difficult. And as a photographer, most people often don't realize that we spend the majority of our time sitting in front of a computer screen by ourselves, editing pictures, editing video. And so as an introvert, that's much easier than for an extrovert who very quickly starts to feel cooped up in that sort of a lifestyle, which for me, it's a relief, it's relaxing. I love sitting and editing photos all the time, honestly. The pandemic was a huge blow to my business because most of my income until then was coming from wedding photography. And as most people are probably aware, these huge events all got canceled, all got moved, so I lost for this year just a tremendous amount of money and had to scramble to figure out what to do next. I was about to go back to work as a fire alarm technician again, and honestly, just because things were so sudden and so devastating, I was thinking, I don't know, do I need to sell all this camera equipment and get out of this business? Because, yeah, it wasn't going great. But then, in the process of moving our church services online, at the time I was just doing music at church, and all of a sudden I'm doing videography. My role there expanded temporarily, and so I'm making more money there. YouTube, as you might know, people spent a lot more time at home watching videos online, and so my YouTube business has grown as well. And so, thankfully, because I kind of keep a hand in every pot, it was easy for me to transition a little bit. Now, things still aren't going great this year, not as well as they might have been otherwise. And so the pandemic has really forced me to diversify, forced me to switch things around a little bit. And honestly, we don't know yet whether or not it has fundamentally changed the photography, the wedding photography, the event industry, and so a lot of stuff is really still up in the air about that kind of thing. And so there's a lot of uncertainty, and all of us as photographers are kind of just sitting on the edge of our seats waiting to see where this takes us, what's going to happen next. So it's not over yet, we don't know, and so I'm counting on my other income streams to carry me through. But I'm not quitting yet. I would say, to start out it sounds cliche, but don't be afraid to follow your dreams, but at the same time, don't be afraid to be smart about it. As someone who started this later in life, I took a more pragmatic approach, and so don't put yourself in debt trying to chase those dreams, because a lot of the time, especially this year, we found things can kind of come crashing down. But at the same time, don't let your day-to-day, don't let your day job, don't let the daily grind push you away from doing the things that you love. You have to find the time to pick up those hobbies, to pick up those dreams. And as you do, as you take your time doing it, you can get further into it. You can learn, you can grow. Specifically as a photographer, you don't have to go into debt doing this. You don't have to jump off a cliff to get started. Just start small. You don't have to start by shooting weddings, by doing these grand projects. You can start with little things, you can start with your friends, you can start with your cell phone. Cell phones are great cameras these days. And yeah, you can't get the bokeh, the blurry backgrounds in all situations, but it helps you to learn about composition and learn about photography in general. So you can start and learn anywhere and then build up from there. And as long as you keep moving forward, you will get there eventually. I can be found a lot of different places. As I mentioned before, I'm on YouTube, and you can find me there, youtube.com/WesPerry. I think that's it. Pretty easy to find when you Google me. I'm also on Instagram, instagram.com/WesPerryPhoto. I'm on Facebook, everyone's on Facebook, that's obvious. So yeah, you can find me just about everywhere. On YouTube, it's not so much about weddings as it is about the gear, about technique, about learning things, reviews. Because as I said before, I'm not just a photographer, but I'm also a technologist. And so for me, I'm kind of getting off topic here, but photography is a great blend between art and technology. And so it kind of pleases both halves of my brain. So on YouTube, I kind of talk about the tech, and on the day-to-day, I take pictures and make some art. And so you can find me in any of those places. If you just want to see the art, come over to Instagram. If you want to learn about photography and videography, come over to YouTube. See you there.